going on, Vikings fans? Welcome on in the Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Seatman, and coming up on today's show, I want to dive into 5 players that can shock the NFL world on Monday night. Not the main guys. We're not talking about the Jeffersons, the Darisaws, the Grenards. A couple of unknown players where us Vikings fans, we know all about them, but they're going to put their name on notice this Monday night against the Bears. And speaking about that game, if you guys want the Vikings not only to beat the Bears, not only to move to 1-0, but to embarrass them and dominate them in their home building. Give me a SKOL down below in the comments section. Make it look like U.S. Bank Stadium on game day. Spam those SKOLs down below. Now let's talk about 5 players to watch. Monday night against the Chicago Bears. It's going to be a hell of a game. I got full faith in this team getting a victory in Chicago. Kevin O'Connell, 3-0 in Soldier Field, taking on the Bears. And, I will say this quickly. When you talk about 5 guys that are going to, put their name on the map on Monday night, J.J. McCarthy is obviously the number one guy that is going to shock the NFL world the most. But I do want to dive into some others because I also have full faith in J.J. getting it done. I think even, when we look back on it, I could even see us Vikings fans underrating what he is going to do heading into the season. So obviously he's going to put on a show. Let's talk about some other guys. Let's talk about my guy, Jordan Mason. I am the leader of the Jordan Mason fan club. Couldn't be higher on this guy. I think he's one of the most underrated running backs in the NFL right now, and he had a fantastic season for the 49ers this past year. And I think a lot of people, think about Jordan Mason, the success he had this past season, to say, oh, it was all Kyle Shanahan. He was the one calling the shots. Anybody could play running back in that system. Well, I'll show you guys this. So this is RYOE on the bottom, rushing yards over expected per attempt. Now, RYOE, next-gen stats, every single run play in the NFL, they'll say, hey, this running back was supposed to get a certain amount of yardage on a given play. With Jordan Mason, got the most out of every single carry. He was up there for most rushing yards over expected per attempt. And also on the left side, this was going against stacked boxes. So 8+ defenders in the box. Jordan Mason was number 1 in the league in facing stacked boxes. So he had a lot of guys, a lot of attention on him, and he was still able to be super effective. And also, he was third next to 2 elite running backs. Like Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley had unreal years this past season, and Jordan Mason was right behind him. 1.38 yards over expected per carry. That was 3rd in the National Football League. I couldn't be more excited to watch this guy play, and I understand free agency, like getting Will Fries, getting Ryan Kelly, getting Hargrave and Allen. We all love those moves, but I think the Vikings adding Jordan Mason will be the most impactful move they made this entire offseason. Now, that also combines with the offensive line with Fries and Kelly. But I think when it's all said and done, and we're talking about this football team at the end of the season, we're going to be looking at that trade with the Niners, be like, we only gave up a 6th-round pick for Jordan Mason, one of the better running backs in the league. Like, he is that good. I think he's got top 10, top 7 potential this upcoming season. He's a freak athlete, gets the most out of every single carry. So he's the number 1 guy that I think is going to put his name on the map week 1 Monday night. But number 2 here, shout out to Jalen Redmond. He got the nod as being the starting nose tackle for this group, which, wasn't too big of a shocker. I thought it was either going to be him or, maybe Elijah Williams or Levi Drake Rodriguez, but they went with the guy who's done it at a higher level in regular season games compared to those two. And if you guys remember, Jalen Redmond, he was completely balling out when he was playing with the Vikings this past season. Now, again, very limited action. Didn't really start playing it until week 12, I believe, of this past year, but still 208 snaps, graded out incredibly well, 77.2 overall grade. That was 13th out of all eligible defensive tackles. Pass rush, solid, but that run defense grade, 73.0. That was 16th out of 219 eligible defensive tackles. And, he's going to have to play a massive role for this defensive line because, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, at this point in their careers, they are more pass rush specialists. And losing a guy like Harrison Phillips, one of the best 2-gappers, one of the best run-stuffing defensive tackles in the league, that did leave a massive hole in this defense. But with a guy like Jalen Redmond stepping in, I could see him just kind of being that cog in the middle of the defense and just embracing that Harrison Phillips role. Like, there was a reason the Vikings moved off Phillips. Yes, it was to get extra draft capital. They clearly valued that. But they also had faith in the guys behind him, and a big reason for that was Jalen Redmond. I have all types of faith in this guy. I think he's going to have a monster season. So shout out to Jalen Redmond. He has gone through a lot in his life. He was dealing with blood clots dating back to his time at Oklahoma, but he was a five-star recruit. Like, this wasn't like a typical, UDFA where, they were under-scouted or, they were underranked in their class and they just kind of, you know, weren't really that noticed. But Jalen Redmond, like, he was a five-star. He was supposed to be a draft pick. He was supposed to be one of the better defensive tackles in his class. So thank the Lord the Vikings got him. But he's probably up there as one of my top breakout candidates on the Vikings roster. But I'll ask you guys this. Who is your top breakout candidate on the Vikings roster? Talking about a guy who, like a Jordan Mason, like a Jalen Redmond. We'll get to three more names here in a second. But you guys, let me know your thoughts here quickly. Who's your top breakout candidate on the Vikings roster? I'll get to three more players who could shock the NFL world this Monday night. But before we do so, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. And you and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. So don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. And if you guys download the app today, plug in promo code CLNS, we'll hook you guys up with $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. My favorite part about Prize Picks, it's super simple to play. All you got to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And if you get your picks right, you could cash in. Prize Picks is also the best way to get action on sports in more than 40-plus states, California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks puts their users first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. They also offer Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. And I already got my lineup for Week 1. Vikings taking on the Chicago Bears, and I think the I think the kickers are going to have a pretty big impact in this game. I got Santos making 2 field goals. I got Will Reichard going more on 1.5. Then I think Hawk's going to have a big-time performance, more than 41.5 receiving yards. I'm also going to take J.J. McCarthy. Watch out for his legs this weekend. And then also Colston Loveland. Love that pick for the Chicago Bears. I hate to say it, but him only having a more or less of 28.5 receiving yards. Got to take the more on that. So if you guys want to, download the app today. Plug in that promo code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Shout out to Prize Picks, though, for sponsoring today's show. Prize Picks. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. All right, let's dive into the other guys here. And can't wait for this game. I feel like the Vikings, even though they are they got some blue chippers. They got a lot of good football players at the top of the roster, but they also got some just sleepers and some breakout candidates. And a guy who's going to play a massive role for this defense, it's got to be Theo Jackson. Theo Jackson, the Vikings paid him this offseason a 3-year, around $10 million deal. And with the Vikes losing Cam Bynum in free agency, he is going to have him play a massive role because the Vikes, they run that 3-safety set 98% of the time. And Harrison Smith, a question mark if he's going to play. I still expect him to be out there, but if he can't, Theo Jackson's going to have to be on the field for every single snap. And also with the Vikings only having 4 corners on the roster, I could see them leaning into more, the bandit defense like we've been talking about here on the channel, but also watch out for a guy like Jay Ward. But it's not only week 1 Jackson's going to play a massive role. He's going to play a massive role this entire season. And I think he is a guy where Brian Flores clearly has some trust in him. He has some faith in him because, safety was a need for this team heading into the draft and free agency. They didn't bring anybody in. They like the guys they had in that room, and that guy being Theo Jackson. But number 4, I'm going to have Will Fries. Now, obviously Will Fries is already, a premier guard in the NFL, but I just don't think he's that well-known of a name when you are talking about some of the top offensive linemen in the league. And this guy was unbelievable before he got hurt this past season. Overall grade, 86.9. That was 4th in the league. Pass block grade, 74.9. That was 18th. And run block, he's a mauler in the run game. 5th in the National Football League. And again, very limited action before he got hurt. But if he can replicate that, man, he'll live up to this contract the Vikings gave him. He was the only player in free agency this past cycle to sign a 5-year deal. All the other contracts were either 1, 2, 3, or 4 years. Fries was the only guy to sign a 5-year contract. And could you imagine if this guy's an all-pro caliber guard, even though he's making $21.5 million in 27, 28, and 29, if he lives up to this contract, this could look like a bargain. So I could see him and just the whole Vikings rushing attack kind of making a name for themselves on Monday night. But another huge X factor in the secondary, it's got to be Isaiah Rodgers. The Vikings are probably going to run only 2 corners on the field majority of the time. One obviously being Byron Murphy. You can line him up all over, slot, outside, doesn't matter. But the same can be said for Isaiah Rodgers. Now, him last season with Philadelphia, Super Bowl champ, he played great. 76 overall grade, 80.6 in the run defense. Obviously, Flores asked his corners to tackle at a high level, but he also had a solid coverage grade. Now, this was in very limited action. So can he up that snap count? Can he up, his usage, but maintain the production? That's going to be a huge question mark. But the Vikes need him to play good because this cornerback room, it's one pretty thin with talent, but also just thin with bodies. Like they're an injury away from kind of hitting the panic alarm and saying, "Hey, we got to go trade for a guy." But I fully expect Rodgers to play well. Brian Flores has been raving about this guy the entire offseason. And if Flores believes in him, he knows more about football than I will ever know, that anybody watching will ever know. So him having that faith in Rodgers, I'm all in on it. And then also, Rodgers does struggle. Watch out for a guy like Jeff Okuda. But I got full faith in Rodgers as well. Now, I'll ask you guys this to close out today's show. Who are you most excited to watch on Monday? For me, and again, you can't say J.J. McCarthy. For me, it's got to be Jordan Mason. Absolutely love his game. Love the way he runs the football. So you guys let me know. Who are you most excited to watch this Monday? Also, hit me up on Twitter. I'll be tweeting about the Vikings all season long. That's the handle right there, at Pat Seeps. Give me a follow over there. And if you guys do, I'll give you guys a follow right on back. But we appreciate all of you guys watching today's show. As always, let's go Vikes.